Hey there. Thanks very much for checking out my YouTube video. Greatly appreciate it. I'm doing a quick little live um, shot here. It's basically, again, really simple. It's just a little webcam, really cheap. I do a little Yeti mic. So I got the little Blue Yeti right here, which is pretty decent. So my intent here is basically just to go over what I've been doing as a Turo host, and I'm fairly new to it. So we're talking, well, we're about 6 months. Well, not 6 months. We're about 4 months into it, maybe 5 months into it. So this is just a recap, just to kind of go over what I've been doing and how I've been handling Turo as far as that's concerned. So again, don't expect big production value here or beautiful studio lights or anything along that line. What I've got is essentially just a cheap little setup. So again, the idea at some point, I'm going to take some of this audio and roll it into, in all likelihood, a podcast of some sort. So you don't get the fancy YouTube studio in the back. You've got my little art studio. I do a little 3D printing and a few other little things as kind of hobbies. So you've kind of fallen into that category of a bit of a hobby. With that said, I wanted to give Turo a try and just kind of see what it was all about. And I thought I would document it as I was going along. So if you're out there in Southern Ontario or in Canada, because there's not a lot of people out there talking about it from this vantage point, a lot of people down in the States to kind of reference, and they're very helpful as far as that's concerned, but not really a Canadian exclusive or a Canadian market point of view. So where am I at? So I've got the vehicle going out today at 4 o'clock. It's going for a 10-day rental. Odd little thing. Again, I've got another driver's license. This is from El Salvador. So he's here. When Turo does the license verification, they basically give you a little idea here. So I've got my laptop set up. I'm not set up to do a split screen or show anything. So you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. So when the client books, down below, kind of midway on the booking, it says approved to drive. So it means he's already gone through the process with Turo. He's already sent them a driver's license, and they've already said that's fine, right? So the insurance will cover him while he's here, which is not a problem. The dilemma that I find is that kind of last minute, I don't think it's any fault of the actual client, but I need to confirm the driver's license. The dilemma is I'm not really set up to confirm an El Salvador driver's license or an international driver's license. Ontario, I can confirm an Ontario license very easily. There's a service online that's free. I can run the driver's license number, actually the last little prefix of it in their name, and it'll come up. It won't tell me any real personal information, but it'll say valid, which is nice. And it's one of the features I used to use when I worked at a car dealership when I was selling cars. Whenever somebody came in to take a vehicle for a drive, I'd always run their license really quick through that service, which is, again, is free. And it would just come up and say, yeah, that is a class category. It would tell you that, whether it was a learner's permit or whether they were fully vetted. And then it would come up and say, yeah, it's valid and there's no issues, right? So that's what it doesn't tell you their address, anything along that line, because you have the driver's license, right? So, but it's a nice little service. So you can say, okay, that's covered. But I don't have that ability to do it with an El Salvador license or an international license. So I have to rely on Turo to verify that. So what I like to do is I like to call Turo's 1-800 number and just confirm that the license is valid and it is current and that it will fall under the category for their insurance so that I'm covered. And I think that Turo, if they're doing any updates or changing the site, should say license confirmed, approved to drive, but it should have a little asterisk there that says international license or country of origin. And I've had that 3 times so far. And I don't have a problem with someone coming in and using an out of province or an international driver's license or a UK license. Don't have an issue with that. The only issue I have is I want to make sure that if there's an accident or there's a problem, why they have the vehicle, that I'm not going to have that huge hurdle to have to deal with going through the process. So it would be really nice if they made a little note here that said approved to drive, license origin, and then all I need to do is verify that there's a physical license. Like, that's it. it's a little frustrating from that standpoint. So if you're out there as a first-time host and you're kind of going, oh, I got all these weird little licenses from all around the world, I think the issue is that if someone from El Salvador or someone from the Ukraine or someone from India is in Canada and they try and book a car through a traditional car rental agency, I think there's a surcharge attached, and it's probably substantial. I don't have an international license, so I can't verify that. I've never been in the rental industry, so I can't speak to it, but I'm just logically based on anything that I've watched kind of in the past with rental agencies, they like to tack a service charge on everything. So odds are there's a service charge or additional insurance that you need when you've got these licenses. And I think Turo waives that, or it doesn't really address it. So I think that's why I'm seeing a lot of tourists. I wouldn't really describe them as tourists because what I can, near as I can tell, is that they're working here. They just haven't gone through the hurdles of changing their license over yet. So, grain of salt from that standpoint. But it kind of gives a bit of an irk. So if you're first time out there and you're going, what do I do with these international licenses? You have to call Turo and basically say, hey, look, this is what I've got. I need to verify and go from there, right? So that way you're covering your butt a little bit. Now, the dilemma is that because they're only doing it on the phone, they don't send you a verification. So it's going to be a he said, she said type deal if there was a problem. Oh, I did call you, blah, blah, blah. And then it'll be like, oh, well, you talked to somebody in the call center, didn't really know what they're talking about. So it becomes a problem. I try using their chat AI to help me with these questions, and it always redirects me to something completely unrelated. So again, if you're a first-time person on Turo, I use ChatGPT because ChatGPT seems to have everything that Turo has put out on the internet. So if you ask it and say, what's the deal with the international driver's license, it'll actually give me a pretty good logical response and say, yeah, this is what's covered and so forth, according to information found on the internet. So I use that, then I also call as well. So one of those things that I would probably suggest. Good example. Let's see if we can do one right now. Got my phone handy, so let's see what happens. It'll be the one time that it won't work, but I find this helpful. Again, if you're the type of person, you haven't read all the policies, you breeze through them, right? I'll raise the volume up just so maybe you can hear it. Put it up by the microphone. I'm using a Google Pixel phone, so it's pretty handy. It's a couple of years old. Someday I will upgrade to something a little better. Hi there. How are you doing today?
Hi there. I'm doing well, thank you. How about you? Are you enjoying your Google Pixel 5?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for the question. We've talked briefly about Turo and international driver's licenses. Can you tell me what you told me earlier?
Certainly. If a client has a driver's license from El Salvador, it's generally considered an international license if it's in English or accompanied by an international driving permit. In Ontario, this allows them to drive legally for a limited time. It's always good to double check specific rental requirements and provincial regulations to be sure.
Now, in the past, I've used you for referencing on pricing and vehicle choices. Could you give me a little synopsis of what we talked about?
Sure. We've discussed Turo a lot, including vehicle choices and rental pricing. You were looking into different vehicles, like the Mitsubishi Outlander and Chevy Cruze for your rental business. We've also talked about rental trends and strategies, especially in Southern Ontario. Does that cover what you were thinking of?
Yeah, I was just verifying it. I'm doing a quick little YouTube video, and we're discussing how ChatGPT can help me on Turo.
Got it. That sounds like a great topic. If you need any more details or tips for your video, just let me know.
Thank you kindly.
You're very welcome. Good luck with...
So I've always found that to be pretty helpful. So it's one of those things where I subscribe to that. I think it runs $18 or $20 Canadian. It's probably US actually. It's probably $20 US, which is like a bazillion dollars Canadian. But I use that all the time, and I use that for responding to clients. So in other words, the lovely ChatGPT there drafts up the email responses, also takes care of some of the paperwork and administrative end of it for me. Also gives me a checklist of things that I need to do to process the vehicle for delivery. So in other words, it gives me the list for the rental agreement, insurance documentation, provides me with the liability card and contact details through Turo. And then I mark everything onto an envelope and include it in there. So it's really good for that particular purpose. The only drawback is it doesn't do accounting, which is unfortunate. So if you're out there and you're one of the members of ChatGTP or your own super brain, it'd be really handy if you made it capable of doing basic accounting or bookkeeping. That would be spectacular. I use an accountant, but I would always like to have I can't afford a daily bookkeeper. Number one, I'm not that busy. But it would be one of those nice little features. So if anyone knows out there, ChatGTP, or if there's another service out there that uses AI, I like using it. I find it very helpful. It also helped out with the description online. It also helped narrow down my vehicle. It did some of the basic shopping for me. It also confirmed a lot of the things that I already knew, like for instance, the Outlander. We already worked out the numbers on the rentals. We also worked out, we did a feasibility study on length of use based on average kilometers on the end life of the Outlander. So in Southern Ontario, when you're looking at salvage information, when the vehicle's getting scrapped, most Outlanders get scrapped at about 400,000 kilometers to 375,000 kilometers. The main reason being that they get scrapped is just a subframe issue. It's not that it's an issue; it's an expensive piece to replace. The frame itself, I think, is about $380, but the labor is 10 hours. So if you had a vehicle with 375,000 kilometers on it and had the quarters gone and everything was kind of on its way out, you probably wouldn't invest that. So to get an Outlander with 140 to 170,000 kilometers just out of the Mitsubishi warranty, the price stays steady. So it's one of those things where as long as it doesn't rust and it doesn't fall apart, in other words, it's got to get oiled and oiled really, really well, means I can run that vehicle for 2 years. And strangely enough, I'll probably get close to what I paid for it. I won't get my service costs back or my maintenance stuff, but I'll get a good chunk of that expense back. So it's a really good vehicle, at least going through AI, as far as that depreciation rate and where the values are set. It's very close to a Toyota as far as that's concerned, which is interesting because I couldn't get into a Toyota SUV on the price point of a Mitsubishi. And I lucked out. I actually, on this particular GT, it went through Mitsubishi Canada as a demo. So I'm actually really familiar with that car. I think it actually sat at the dealership I was working at for about 3 months. So it got passed around because it was an early arrival. So it was part of staff training. And I think it actually went to the Toronto International Car Show. I think it went to the Montreal Car Show as a display model. It's not fancy. Like, I'm not saying that it's a show car and it's worth, it's got Jackie Chan's signature on the dashboard. It doesn't, but it's one of those things where it was one of the early arrivals, and it's fairly well equipped for what it is. And then it had all the service records with it. So I'm pretty jazzed about that one. But AI confirmed all that. So ChatGPT helped me go through that process. It also helped me out with confirming things like what are the accounting rates? In other words, what's it going to cost me to do my yearly taxes? What's it going to cost to do the Turo taxes? It gave me a rough estimate to work within. So when I'm talking to an accountant, I'm not cold. So it's like, oh my God, it wasn't like that at all. So it's like, oh yeah, that's what the AI informed me. That would be the competitive rate. And then anything below that would be questionable. You know, are they qualified? Is it a full featured office, that type of deal, right? So ChatGPT is really handy. Also for licensing issues. So again, it'll run through the real quick stuff, right? So I called up Turo, again, to confirm, I apologize, we went on a little AI rant. I can do that. So I called up Turo and confirmed everything. Their service online, if you're not in regular business hours, I think it goes to a call center, and I don't think they're all that knowledgeable. So business hours are kind of key on that one. And so far, I've been talking to the same lady every single time. So again, I think it goes to their office, and I think I'm one of the few people that actually call, or I've just managed to luck it out. Who knows? But their chat system on their stuff is horrible. So if you've got their little Autobot system and you're going through, okay, let's go through the questions, it redirects you 8 million ways from Sunday, doesn't answer your question correctly. It is really poor. You're better off just going through and reading the terms of service and trying to narrow it down chapter-wise, which can be a bit of a headache if you're a new Turo host, because you don't really know what the question is. Right? You don't have the wording right, or you don't have the terminology appropriate to actually follow through with it. So using your using ChatGPT, at least you can get the terminology and you can get an idea to direct your questions and go know where you're going. So international driver's license is a bit of a hurdle. This gentleman here wants to go cross-border shopping. That was a bit of a red flag for me, to be honest with you, because I haven't experienced that before. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, I get stuck at customs because he's brought something back that shouldn't have. So again, it's one of those things that you kind of look at, you kind of go, bit of a, but again, that's the paranoid old guy in me. So I called Turo and said, well, what's the deal? And apparently it's a pretty common thing. So it's not a hurdle by any stretch of imagination. It's like going out of your region, but it's like a double-edged sword because it's just a pain in the butt. There is a problem, right? I've got a border to deal with. So that's a little annoying. And I think based on the conversation with the client that I was having here, a lot of Turo hosts won't really allow that. And he was nice enough to be upfront with me about it. So it's kind of like, well, if you're upfront about it and you seem pretty legit as far as that's concerned, it can't be a problem. But there's different things that you need to provide now. So now it's really important in that little envelope I make up for the delivery, very key to include the policy for the rental, so that when he gets to the border, you can say, look, I'm authorized to use this. Turo doesn't say this, but you need to put a copy of the ownership in there as well. There's a little permit number that they use to track the vehicle going in and going out, along with the license plate. So they'll ask for the ownership, especially if it's a rental or if it's abstract, which definitely a Turo peer-to-peer would be abstract for somebody at the counter. So they're going to look at it and go, I don't know what to do with the paperwork from Turo because it's just a print, right? So they're going to look at it and go, it's not even an official document type deal. Like it would be a questionable red flag moment for me if I were at the counter at customs and going, go back, right? So include a copy of the ownership, so at least they can say, well, okay, I've got the permit number to attach and I've got the license plate number so they can time it going in and going out, right? So that's important. The other one is there's a liability card for the Canadian end of it, and there's a liability card for the US. And Turo's website wasn't very clear on that. So it's a quick little print. So I just printed the US and Canadian up. So if he does end up getting into a problem, he's got the checklist for the American side. He's got the checklist for the Canadian side. So there's an accident. I also included my CA membership because the Turo 1-800 number that they've got, I don't know what headsets they're using or what equipment they've got, but it cuts in and out every time I call and it's off hours. It's a horrible, horrible system to deal with because you're usually dealing with someone with a pretty strong accent, which I'm okay with. I don't have a problem with that. I can get around. If someone who's got a strong Hindi accent, no problem. Some of them are Ukrainian, and strangely enough, that has that thick, almost like a Russian background to it. Like it's one of those things where it's not a big deal, but then you get the mic that's cracking in and out, and the audio that goes up and down volume-wise. So now you've got a combination of hard to understand because of the breakup, and then you've got a strong accent on the other end of it, which must be frustrating for them at the desk too. It's got to be a nightmare on their end of it because they're probably going, insane, right? So they're never really happy to talk to you from that stretch at the moment. So I always include my CA membership with the vehicle as well. Again, it's attached to the vehicle. So if there's a problem, and to the most part, what I find, if you're going on a trip, it's going to be something stupid. Like it's going to be, oh, I put the key in the cup holder and closed the door and it locked. Right. Well, to call Turo and then have them send a service out, you could be there for hours, right? Or at least with the CA, or I've always found them to be within a half hour, 45 minutes, even in my little rural community, they're pretty quick. Or because you're not familiar with the vehicle, maybe you run it dry, right? So you need a couple bucks worth of gas. That's pretty normal on a trip. The other one is you going stateside, you've hit a pothole or something, you've managed to blow out a tire. So that requires a tow, that type of deal. So at least it can get towed to someplace, and it's not tied to. I like the Canadian Tire one. You can go stateside with the Canadian Tire one as well, but they only take it to shops that they've approved, Canadian Tire stores, right? So you're kind of attached to that from that standpoint. And if you're Canadian, yeah, you probably are. You're probably aware that Canadian Tire has some issues. I'm not a big. I'm going to. It's just one of those things. They have preset pricing, and to be honest with you, they don't get the cream of the crop as far as technicians are concerned. At least that's what I've always found. So you need a tire replaced, not bad. You got a diagnose problem that you're probably going to be kicking yourself, and mainly because I think at Canadian Tire they don't specialize in a particular brand. So you get a technician, it's like, well, I worked on you work on a Chevy Cruze an hour ago, and the next thing you're working on a BMW, then you've got a Mitsubishi, then you've got a Subaru. Like you're all over the place. So you don't really get an opportunity to become a specialist in one particular vehicle. Whereas when I take my vehicle, like the Cruze, it goes, if I can't fix it, it'll go to a GM dealership, because the diagnose time for someone who's been in and out of that car a bazillion times is going to be much less. So instead of having to spend an hour trying to figure out, oh, there's a problem with this, it's like, oh, it's just exactly like the last car I did. Boom. It's a good point would be there was a short in the license plate light. And because it was a short in the license plate light, it caused issues with the cell phone, the Bluetooth. Don't know why it did, but the guy said, yeah, it's because the bulb's blown in the back and it causes an issue with the audio package. I'm like, how would you ever? And it's like, yeah, because he's familiar with the car, and 10-minute diagnose time, a half an hour worth of pulling the trim and putting a bulb in. Pretty easy. So that's why I kind of hesitated on the Canadian Tire one, and Canadian Tire is cheaper. I bought the Plus plan, which is close to their gold. I didn't go full gold because I don't have an RV. I think if you're driving an RV, you go gold. Plus, I just didn't want to have a limitation on the kilometers driven on a tow. So if someone took it to Toronto and they said, I don't want it, well, then I'll go, well, why do I get it repaired in Toronto? I have to have it towed out here and take it to a local guy, right? So it's a little better from that standpoint. So if you're a first-time Turo host, get a CA membership. Not only do you get a little discount on a few other little things, it's just an easy process for you. It'll cover your butt a little bit. So we talked about licensing, we've talked about AI, and we've talked a little bit about finding an accountant, and we talked a little bit about the CA membership. So far, I'm going to say that December was a write-off. So again, no real business there. January is picking up a little bit, got it pre-booked, so that's kind of nice. Cruze, I'm probably going to end up selling in January, mainly because just the way that the rental rates are on it and the way the insurance cost is. I think if I sell it now, I can get my money out of it, maybe break even, which is a goal, and just rack it up as a learning experience. And I put 1,500 kilometers on it doing the runabout. So, it's serving a purpose. The Outlander's out for the next 2 weeks, so I'll drive the Cruze for a little bit, right? So not an issue from that standpoint. But it's just the return on the rental. I'd be better off, and I think I talked about that in the last video, I'd be better off getting another 7-passenger SUV. I've put my kind of thoughts on that one. So I'm thinking I might get something that's a little higher end. So right now, I see the prices on the Jaguar F-Series. So they're a little SUV. they're almost on par with pricing with a Ford Escape or it's a strange one, really. It's an odd one. I think it's cheaper than a Hyundai Santa Fe. So it's one of those things they really took a hit in the market. So if you're looking at, an 8-year-old unit, really the values are pretty reasonable. Now I'm talking a unit that's going to have 120 to 160,000 kilometers on it. So it's getting cycled out probably from the second owner, right? So there's going to be some issues there, probably tires and brakes and a few little things. But I think I'm going to aim for that because I checked the rental rates on it, and the rental rates are still strong. And I think as a renter, not as a purchaser, you're going to go, oh yeah, I'll take a Jaguar for a weekend. Why not? It's a nice vehicle. It's got leather. It's got all the bells and whistles to it. If I get one without the nav package or the technology package to it, it still comes with a really nice audio package. Still has leather. Still has the roof. And I think that's what I'm going to look for. And I think pricing wise, it's going to be pretty close as far as rental is concerned as an Outlander, maybe 10, 20 bucks more, but it's still going to be in that realm. I don't think they're going to drop much further in price. I think they're going to get to a certain point where they kind of plateau out. I don't think you're going to see a $2,000, unless it's really beaten up, Jag F. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think if I run that for a year or 2 years, I think it'll pay down the vehicle enough where I can rotate out of it and then say, okay, well, if I get it at 130 or 120, if I do the services up, I should be able to run that vehicle for 24,000 kilometers or 30,000 kilometers without any major hiccups. The powertrain is still essentially a Ford. So again, it have all the same quirks and problems that you'd have with a Ford Edge or the Escape. I think they fall into the same category. So it shares Ford components right across the board. So I think that brings some of the service costs down. I don't think the brake rotors and pads are anything particularly special. So again, I don't think they're going to cost an arm and a leg to bring up. Tires are tires. So, it just depends on brand. I think they'll just be normal. So again, I think I can run that on Turo for a year and a half, pay the car down, maybe make a little bit of a profit on it, cover the insurance costs, and be able to say, hey, I've had the use of a Jag for a year or two. It should be kind of cool. I think it's a nice looking vehicle. Is it any different styling wise than a Mazda? I think it looks really close to a Mazda 6, Mazda 5, CX5. I think CX5 is it. Just styling wise, they look very close. So I'm thinking that's where I'm going to go as far as that's concerned. Or I'll find another Outlander. Strangely enough, I can't seem to find a GT with reasonable kilometers on it that hasn't been beaten to death. I've been watching the pages for it. I've got my little ChatGPT out looking as well. So who knows? Maybe I'll get a little ping. It'll be like, hey, Keith, good news. We bought which is kind of what happened last time. So again, that's where I'm at. We're coming up to 30 minutes. I like to keep these little updates around that 30-minute mark, just so you kind of get an idea, and you can go from there. Hopefully, you decide to subscribe. That would be great. The more subscriptions I get, better equipment I'll be able to pick up. So someday maybe we won't be on this little run through on the really, really cheap little camera. I am using the Blue Yeti mic. So the intent at some point is to take all this audio that I'm creating and to edit it down and create little podcasts. So that's kind of the end line with it as well. So we'll go from there. So again, thank you very much for checking out my videos. I do greatly appreciate it. Again, if you got anything that you got kind of a little question about, because I'm doing these 30 minutes, they're not scripted. I do a little bit of research on a few little things kind of beforehand, but essentially it's just the day-to-day run. So if you kind of go, hey, Keith, it'd be really nice to know, how did you shop for insurance? I'll do a quick 30-minute video on that. If you want to know, hey, where do I get my tires? And I source them. Pretty neat. So most of the time I get my tires below retail. So it's one of those things where, because I worked in the trade, I know a couple sources that get very affordable. The dilemma is you can't take that tire sale away from the shop. So it becomes a struggling point as to how you get them installed. So that's a hurdle as well. So maybe we'll talk about that on a next little topic. Same thing with why I went with Mitsubishi. Maybe we'll have a conversation about part sources, costs, and replacement parts. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next video. So again, thank you very much for taking the time. I do appreciate it. I know these tend to be, they wind all over the place, and there's no real master plan to it. So I do apologize for that. I do have a little note, and this is what we'll talk about, but that's essentially it. And again, hope you enjoy them. And if you are in Canada and you are running a little Turo fleet, I would love to hear from you. I put my feelers out to a couple of them, but no one's really responded. And I like to talk to somebody that's been doing it for maybe 2 or 3 years and says, hey, you know what, these are the hurdles that I've found, and maybe you can help me shortcut a few things. You go, yeah, you know, shouldn't have bought that Cruze. Yeah, you should have bought another SUV, or maybe pickup trucks are where to go. You know, it's always nice to know. Or maybe you've made a couple mistakes. Like I've looked at those Fiats and thought to myself, they're cute little cars and they're cheap and they do rent well. At least the numbers are pretty decent. But maybe they're a nightmare car, which I suspect they are. But maybe you're running them, you kind of go, yes, you're right. You know, keep a transmission. These are the parts you need to have on hand. I understand door handles are really bad on those. So those are things that you'd want to have like in a box in the closet to say, hey, it got broken. It no fault of the guest. And I think they're $40 or $60 and you just bolt one back on and you're ready to go. So again, I'm ranting it, going off topic, but if you've got something along that line, I've been trying to get a hold of somebody who's doing private leasing or sub-financing, not necessarily because I'm looking to purchase anything. I would just like to get an idea of what their thoughts are on car sharing programs and whether that's helped their business to offset the expense associated with their product, or if it's a nightmare. You know, I would like to talk to somebody in that industry and have a little review and say, okay, well, this is where your opinion is on it, and go from there. So again, thank you very much for checking out my videos and taking the patience to listen to them. We'll talk to you later. Have a pleasant and enjoyable day. Let's go to end screen. Bye. Bye. Oh, it's still doing processing. See ya.